Good afternoon, YouTube. This is LA Prepper here in Los Angeles, California. Life's pretty good. Life is a little hard right now. Not that hard. It's hard in a couple ways. It's easy in a lot of different ways. I always have so many good ideas for videos. But I already have a different idea for today's video, thanks to I'm gonna make, and I've never done this, that's why I'm laughing, say it official. I'm gonna make another Overtaxed Taxpayer my YouTuber of the Week. It's my YouTuber of the Week. He has, how many, let me see if I can see how many videos this guy has. I don't know if they, yeah, see, I don't know if it's available to the public. Like the total, oh, wait a second. It probably is. It's not. It says how many views, and I can look at all his videos, but there's not like a count. Well, anyways, got a lot of really good videos, and excuse me, can't wait to get into them a little bit more. So, he inspired me to do a video on an article on a. I was inspired to make this video based on a video of an article of a speech that was broadcast in another video. See if that makes sense. The article, written by Michael Snyder of the economiccollapseblog.com, theeconomiccollapseblog.com, all one word. 11 quotes from Trump's speech to Congress that show that the U.S. economy is in a state of collapse. Now, in case the word Trump triggered you, let me give you my opinion on Trump. First, let me give you an opinion on voting. Does voting matter? Yes. Usually. Unless you're vastly outnumbered with no hope of winning. Example, I'm in a blue state, California. I'm a red voter. So, not in all bills, but things like a presidential election, the state had spoken for me long before I decided to speak. Definitely the numbers changed, and I know Trump did get support in California, but California has been blue for a while, much to its detriment, in my opinion, but that's kind of a separate topic. So I'm quoting this article and these quotes because of how I feel about the content of the quotes, not because how I feel about the person saying them. Aside from the fact that he is our president, and I do feel enough of a sense of patriotism and nationalism that, barring our president being a psychopathic megalomaniac, and I don't think that Trump is either of those things, even remotely, he's a powerful go-getter that likes to have power and likes to be in control. That's how you get to be president. Losers don't become presidents, generally speaking. So let's put Trump aside and let's just think about the economy and whether or not we are collapsing, in a state of collapse, going to collapse, maybe collapsing, maybe getting better. Let's talk about some numbers though. So, number one, 94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Let's talk about something real quick. What does it mean to be in the labor force? There are different classes of labor forces, but generally speaking means a certain working age. I don't know, it's like 18 to 65 or something like that. An adult but before retirement and actively looking for a job. So if 10 million people that were looking for a job but unemployed today stopped looking for a job tomorrow, then according to the numbers, if we could somehow count that, instead of 94 million, there would be 104 million Americans out of the labor force. I think that's what that means. Out of, as in, could be in the labor force. If someone's 70 years old and they're retired, I don't think that's what that number's talking about. And I should probably look into that specific one a little bit more, but a lot of the rest of the stats are a lot more simple. Number 2. And I haven't really commented on number 1 about how I feel about so many Americans being out of the labor force. There are some financial reasons that people don't re-enter the labor force. Maybe they're going to earn their way out of benefits, whether it's free healthcare like Medicaid, whether it's they're going to earn their way into a tax bracket. The difference between making 10,000 and 11,000 might not be that much, but the difference, if you have to file taxes at 13,000, you're making 12,000 a year right now. Maybe you work part time. You're not really motivated to make 13,000 and then get on that tax roll. So, but as far as people being completely out of the labor force, whether they get discouraged, whether they need to be retrained, or they never had the skills in the first place, it's such a complex subject. I'm not even going to try to touch on it based on my own anecdotal thoughts, but suffice it to say, not a great statistic. You want people to be in the labor force, generally. Since our current system is essentially, unless you're in retirement or you're on public aid, it's you make money or you starve. You make money or you sleep on the street. So unless we teach everyone to be an entrepreneur and start their own business and get people to work for them, which is not a terrible idea, you need to work to make money. You need money to pay for stuff. So people need to be in the labor force. Otherwise, who's taking care of them? Is it their parents? Is it their friends? Their other family? Is it us? Probably us. If it's not their family, it's probably us. Friends don't take care of friends that long usually, even good friends. Number 2, over 43 million people are now living in poverty. What does that mean? Well, there's a poverty line, which is just a number of annual income. It's not a very good estimate of poverty. Income is not always a reflection of wealth, although it certainly has a very strong correlation to wealth. People that have a lot of income generally are more wealthy, but not always the case. They can have a lot more debt too. They can have negative wealth. If I make $1 million a year and I owe $2 million on a boat, $5 million on a house, and $100,000 on credit cards, that's great that I'm making that per year. But as soon as I get fired, as soon as I lose my job, how am I going to pay for the boat? How am I going to pay for the house? How am I going to pay for $100,000 in credit card debt? Was I wealthy? Maybe temporarily wealthy, but when you add up the balance sheet, I owed, those millions plus the debt, and would have to let it all go and have nothing. Something to think about. Debt does not equal wealth. You can use debt to acquire wealth, like buying a house long term versus renting is typically seen as a sensible move. But so 43 million living in poverty. I think there's a lot more. It's a lot worse than that, but people are poor. Capitalism never promised that everyone would be wealthy. That's not the promise of capitalism. Capitalism, which is the majority, free market capitalism is the majority of the economy that we operate in. It's not all of the economy. Don't need to get into that, and I'm not the hugest conspiratorial person, but at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that not everything is as it seems. I think if you believe, honestly, that everything is as it seems, you've just decided to not think critically about anything. Even if everything is as it seems, you still have to be skeptical and really verify everything, verify to be sure. But at any rate, so 43 million people living in poverty. Yeah. there's sort of different conversations about that. On the one hand, what what is that costing us as a society? What is it costing them, the people in poverty? What's the opportunity cost? That's a very common economic term. What are we missing out on? You know, take a young person who can't pay for school and have them grow up, look at their whole life and what they contribute to society. If we pay for their school versus if we don't pay for their school, just taking one financial thing that many societies, many cities, counties, countries do help pay for young people to go to school. Not to say that if we don't pay for that person to go to school, that they never go to school. It's still very inexpensive in this country to go to school. So the point I'm trying to make about poverty is you can't just look at it as like a decency thing. You can't just look at it like, well, we should keep people off the streets because no one wants to sleep in the streets. It's a really like moronic way to look at it. Of course, no one wants to live like that. And even people that sort of psychologically get used to living like that, the majority of people are not homeless as like a primary lifestyle choice. They would probably prefer to, whether or not they would prefer to work, they would probably prefer to have shelter and to have a more safe, stable environment than being on the streets. Okay. So, beyond looking at the quality of life that they live, I think the bigger question is what could we, not like how could we use them, but what could they be contributing to society that we're not gaining that benefit? Whether it's physical things like, you know, uh, like sweat equity, like physical labor to building something, repairing a highway. Our roads are crap, our bridges are old, our buildings are old. Um, Even if a building is not unsound structurally, it could be unsound economically, environmentally. We spend a huge amount of energy heating and cooling our buildings. And the funny thing is, if you go 100 feet, 200, 300 feet down in the earth, not even really that deep, you could go 20 feet, 30 feet down in the earth, put a bunch of water pipes, and use the earth as a giant heat sink. The earth stays, below the surface, stays at a pretty stable temperature. It's heated from the outside but also from the inside. And the heat from the inside and the fact that soil has a very large thermal inertia, um, you could heat up a little bit of soil pretty easily, but when you look at the mass of the earth, its temperature isn't going to go up and down like that. Its temperature is, you know, I'm not talking about climate change like average temperatures. I'm talking about the temperature of the physical friggin' earth. Like, what is the temperature of the dirt a mile down, 2 miles down? Whatever temperature it is, it's basically the same temperature all the time. So, this idea that we have to spend billions and trillions of dollars heating and cooling air with electricity or gas or coal or nuclear energy, it's just ludicrous. It's completely friggin' ludicrous. So I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent about shelter and such, but the point about poverty is it's not how people are living. It's those 43 million people, would they be able to contribute to a better life for everyone? Would they be able to invent a machine that can print food easier or give better health care? What if we could make a doctor that could give free health care on the street that was a robot? What if you were a homeless person and you could just go up to this robot like a health droid and get a checkup, free checkup? And if you have had a stroke recently, or you're at a high risk for a stroke or a heart attack, or you have diabetes, your insulin's way off, or maybe you have a disease that you didn't know about. Maybe we're going to get to a hepatitis. We have an HIV test now that's like 10 minutes or something. Maybe we'll get to where we can do full blood work and a decent amount of DNA work, if they should so volunteer, in 5 or 10 minutes. And we can diagnose someone, for example, like hepatitis or diabetes, if those diseases aren't properly treated, um, not only do they have significant ramifications for the individual, but they have ramifications for the general public. If someone's, excuse me, if someone has to be in the ICU, the intensive care unit, for even a week, that could be like $20,000, $30,000. So on the one hand, you're going to have people who say, we can't spend more money on the poor. Yes, everyone wants to spend more money on the poor. And wouldn't it be nice if they all lived in houses and had free health care, et cetera, et cetera? But the simple fact is that until we even get remotely close to spending enough money for an ounce of prevention, there's no point in trying to bitch about how much a pound of cure costs. Because that's what we're paying for right now. We're paying for a pound, we're paying for tons and tons of cure and spending very, very little energy on prevention. So what benefit could poor people provide to society if they were so motivated and enabled? Not everyone has that drive to give back in that way, but there is a percentage that do. And I'm of the personal opinion that within reason, and I think it's completely affordable to do, we can we can take care of people to at least a level to where if they have a desire to contribute to society, that they have the ability to do so. They can take a shower, they can be presentable, they can get help, you know, and that it's easy for them. It's not always easy for someone on the street to just walk into a library or just walk into an interview or even walk into a store that has nice clothes, you know. If you haven't had a shower in a few days, how likely is the person at Macy's going to want to deal with you about buying a suit? Hopefully Macy's, they would be cool, because Macy's is like one of my favorite department stores, and I haven't shopped there in years, but they tend to have a higher caliber of staff that works there. So I've talked about number two now, for talked about poverty for way too long, but I do feel strongly about it. I would love to hear your thoughts. Um, should we what standard of living do you think we should pay for the man or woman who cannot take care of themselves? If your standard is nothing, let them live and fend for themselves, that's fine. um, I'm curious though, so let me do a quick time check. 18 minutes. See if I can spend not too much time on the next ones. 43 million Americans are on food stamps. Okay, this ties right back into number two, poverty. What, it's funny that socialists, I think, talk about like, oh, I want a socialist country. We have a partly socialist country. Um, Using the state's money, which is the people's money, to pay for other people's. We're taking from one person to help another person pay for their food. Um, I suppose I'm of the opinion that, okay, this is my opinion on providing aid to people. I'm going to sum it all up right now. Service over cash. That's what I believe in. I know the government does not necessarily do things more efficiently than private individuals or private companies do, but nevertheless, you can't ignore the economic difference between giving people $100 to buy their own food or spending $100 to feed as many people as you can. Um, Economies of scale is like a proven economic principle. Government kind of screws it up a lot of times, not always, but so how do I feel about food stamps? I don't think it's the right solution, but I think feeding people is something that the country needs to do. Not just feed people, teach people how to grow. You know, make it easier for people to. Um, Sorry, my back is just killing me here. I gotta adjust. Make it easier for people to take care of themselves, to start a garden, to grow on public land. Um, it'd be great if there was a law that, like a garden law, that said You can start a garden anywhere you want on public land as long as it's not bothering anyone. And if anyone that's managing that land, like on a park or something, wants to remove it, then they have to have a very, very compelling reason why your food producing garden should be removed. Something like that. So, my feeling on food stamps. More than 1 in 5 people. Number 4, more than 1 in 5 people in their prime working years are not working. I kind of talked about number 1 with the labor force. So, um, again, capitalism. Know, know your economic systems. And before you bitch about, you know, what corrupt politicians are doing or what big business is doing, come to grips with capitalism. Come to grips with profit. Capitalism is a very, um, it's an emotionless thing. It doesn't have any emotion. Capitalism's main goal is to make profit. Is it more profitable to have more employees or less? I think you know the answer to that. Generally, it's more profitable to have less employees. Unless your employees, like each one of them, is just doing amazing, amazing friggin' things, Maybe if you're Tesla or SpaceX or Google, you just have a bunch of super geniuses working for you. And the more super geniuses you have, the more super awesome things you can do. Most companies do not run like that. Most companies have a bunch of average people working for them. And average people do average shit every single day. And it's not very profitable. It might be a little profitable, but it's not very profitable. So keep in mind the system that we are in isn't going to promise you shit as far as I deserve a job. I need a job. I want a job. Why isn't there a job for me? The government should make a job. Rich people should make a job. Business should make a job. Even starting your own job, I don't think there's enough business for everyone that wants to start a business to start a business. Now, most people aren't pushing themselves in that manner. I'm not. I would love to start a business making sailboats or making custom carbon fiber parts for people. Um, so many crazy ideas, but it's a difficult thing. I think someday I absolutely will, but for the moment, gotta kind of focus on one thing at a time. So that's number 4. A lot of reasons people aren't working. Mainly, the system that we're in doesn't guarantee a job for everyone, so it really shouldn't be a surprise. Number 5, we have the first worst financial recovery in 65 years. Yeah. Um, we have a bloated economy, a ridiculously bloated economy, and we, the individual, the business, the state, the county, the city, the government, the feds, this department, this institution, that institution, we as Americans, everyone, spend money poorly on the wrong things constantly and in ludicrous quantities, trillions of dollars. A trillion is a ludicrous amount of money. It's a lot of money. It's not a lot for a big government or a big country, but it's just so much that to say our debt or deficit, trillions of dollars, most people couldn't possibly fathom that. So the point about the recovery, um, do the best you can to improve your financial strength. Um, if you feel like you haven't been financially growing either nominally, as a percentage, or at least in intellectual financial savviness, um, do something about it. Talk to someone. Talk to a professional. Talk to other people you know with more money than you. People are very ashamed of talking about money. Very ashamed. Even if they have money, it's just not just shame, but it's considered sort of very non-PC to talk about how much you have, how you make it, how you feel about it. I think it's really to our detriment as a society that that's how it is. I feel like I've had like non-conformal experiences in regards to that because I've spent time around real estate professionals a little bit here and there. And I don't know if all investors are like this, but real estate investors, for some reason, maybe it's because they're salespeople, they just love to talk. They love to share about how they did it, what they did, what you should do, and I love them to death for it because they're very rarely shy to talk about what they've had success in as far as trying to build something, trying to build a business, trying to build more clients, trying to build better systems, whatever they're talking about. So to wrap up on number 5, if your life financially is not going the way that you want it for whatever reason, your fault, other people's fault, the economy's fault, Trump's fault, just take action. Don't spend less energy feeling shitty about it and take more action. That's all you have to do. Take persistent and repeated action. Doesn't have to be a ton. Don't spend 10 hours a day, applying to jobs. Just a couple hours a day. If you're not working full time, you absolutely, or even if you are, you have probably an hour or two a day, or at least 5 to 10 hours a week you can spend on improving your financial situation. If that for you is getting a job, you need to be growing as a person right now. You need to be doing something, working on something, learning something, doing something, meeting people. Just take effort on that. Number 6, in the last 8 years, the past administration has put out more new debt than nearly all of the other presidents combined. It's a little bit of an unfair statement because inflation is exponential. Oh, just drew the axis on the wrong side. So, inflation, if this is, M something, I wrote MX, monetary supply, because there's like M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. But this is how many dollars are sort of thought to be in existence, which is kind of a touchy subject in and of itself. But, technically that statement is true because Obama was making debt in this time. But to be honest, assuming the government sort of goes basically on the path that it's going to go, and that's part of the problem and why people prep, Trump is going to increase the debt more than Obama did over the same amount of time. The next president's going to increase the debt more than Trump did. And depending on how steep the curve gets, the next president's always going to not only do more than the last president, but that factor is going to keep increasing because as the graph, the shit problem with exponential graphs is that near the end of it, they just get steep as shit. So, it's all fine and dandy when you're on this shit. You're on like the kind of the slow growth section. But this is what you have to watch out for, guys, is that this is the bad stuff. This is where we've been, slowly inflating, from where a soda cost 5 cents to a soda costs like, $2 right now. The problem is not when a soda costs $3 or $4. The problem is when a soda costs $10. And then when the soda costs $100, you're really fucked. When your soda costs $100, today, tomorrow, it will probably cost $200. So watch out for sodas that cost $100. That's my advice on debt and the amount of debt the government has. Number 7, we've lost more than 1/4 of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA was approved. Okay. Let me talk about manufacturing a little bit. Let me say number 8 as well. In fact, I'll go 7, 8, and 9. So 7 was quarter of our manufacturing jobs since NAFTA. 8 is we've lost 60,000 factories since China joined the World Trade Organization. And number 9 is our trade deficit in goods with the world last year was nearly $800 billion. If you don't know what that is, that means that as far as all the shit that we bought and sold, we bought $800 billion more stuff from other countries than we sold. So, comparative advantage. If pineapples like growing in Hawaii more than they like growing in Nevada, economists would say it probably makes more sense to grow pineapples in Hawaii than it does in Nevada because pineapples like Hawaii. And the amount of work you would have to do into building a greenhouse, monitoring the humidity, etc., to grow a pineapple in Nevada, even though you could do it, it's never going to be as cheap or as easy as growing a pineapple in Hawaii. Okay, now let's switch over to, say, making widgets, making a pen. You form all the parts. Now, no matter how robotic a process is, there are going to be humans involved in making this pen. Even if all the humans are doing is monitoring the machines, but we're not quite at that point yet. A lot of this little fiddly assembly shit, and I don't know if I don't have another pen or tool on me, but putting the spring on the end, putting the thing in, the caps, whether it's putting boxes in a box or putting boxes on a truck, there's a lot of jobs that, even though over the next 5, 10, 20 years, robots are going to get programmed to do, still a little bit challenging to do them now. So, building a pen. China has taken 60,000 factories. Or rather, big business has decided that because we live in a capitalist system and profit is more important than anything, and China has the cheapest labor, which is changing, and I'm not going to get into that, but Mexico, automation, other countries, people are giving China a run for their money as far as being the go-to manufacturer of the world. But since they have been for so long, they kind of have that credit built up. And, rightly so. They build an insurmountable amount of products and ship them all over the world. So they're very good at that. Back to the pen. If you have a kid, you probably want them to go to school. I don't know if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, but maybe college isn't really your thing, or you don't think college is that important. Maybe you think out of high school, it would be perfectly reasonable for your son or daughter, or non-binary child, to work in a pen factory and make pens for a minimum wage of $15 an hour. They would get benefits. They could eventually afford a house. Maybe they get a couple raises to pen production line supervisor to floor supervisor. Being floor supervisor of a factory is a very noble job. The only problem with that is that the company your child works for has to sell their pens for 5 times more than the Chinese company. And it's probably not just 5 times more. It could very potentially be even more than that. But a factor, at any rate. They have to sell their pens for more expensive. Now, they might be quality pens. Maybe they do like low volume stuff. But generally speaking, most American consumers, even though they do like quality, just don't have the money to be buying even medium quality stuff. Most people buy cheap stuff. Not really good, but that's just how most people are. So, the question you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about factories going overseas is, what kind of labor is that? And not only that, how valuable to a society is it to have a bunch of people slaving away in a factory? Even if I don't mean slaves, they're working, but working away in these factories. Do Americans need jobs? Yes, of course we do. Capitalism. You don't work, you don't eat unless someone's taking care of you. And most people do not have someone taking care of them. But so, I feel strongly that manufacturing things is important. It's an important way of life. Factories, of course, are important. Americans do need to produce things. But in regards to factories going overseas, it's not, other than the pure economic contributions that a factory makes, um, it's just not always viable. And it's not something that necessarily we should strive to make viable, because if what it would take to keep a person above the poverty line in America on average, let's say at some point, and according to inflation, it will at some point be $15 an hour. It's probably not right now, but at some point it'll get to be about that much. If the going rate for labor in the developing worlds is $5 an hour, how economically feasible and sensible is it for us to try to do this sort of like low skill level, high volume production when it's 3 times more expensive? Back to the pineapple example. Yes, you can grow pineapple in Nevada, but it's going to be 3 times more expensive, maybe, or something. So we could, through forced or voluntary means, try to build more pen factories in this country, but we really don't need to be building pens. We need to be building rockets and lithium batteries and high-tech medical devices, and we need to be growing food and, agricultural equipment and just things that are of more value than just a pen. So let's not get too wrapped up in the number of factories going here and there. That is a ludicrous amount of factories to lose, absolutely. And I think that there are certainly things that China is doing, economically speaking, that are a bit unfair. Um, that's their right. They're basically under capitalism too. Our financial system is not racist against China. The only reason our system is in opposition with China is because we're both capitalistic countries. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're Americans and they're Chinese, or us versus Russia, or us versus, France or Mexico or Canada, economically speaking. Capitalism, the reason that people have tension with labor from Mexico, or illegal labor, or trade that moves too freely between certain countries and things of that nature, it's economic. It's purely economic. At least it should be. If you're a racist, you're a racist. And, you're a bad person. Don't be racist. But most people feel tension towards other systems mainly for economic reasons. So I've talked kind of a lot about 7, 8, and 9, but just wanted to share. And on number 9, real quick, trade deficit of $800 billion. Um, it's not right. We're not going to get richer as a country if we continue to buy more shit than we sell. Where is this money coming from? That's what I ask you. As a human being, we bought $800 billion more stuff than we sold. So did that money come out of thin air? Did it come out of debt? Is it all debt? Did we have $800 billion more debt created? Did we print money? Did we loan money to ourselves and increase the monetary supply? Was it fractional reserve banking? I'll just leave you to think about that. But if every year in your life you spent $800 million or $800 billion or $800 trillion more than you made, how long could you do that? Forever? I don't think you could do it forever. That's why people prep. You can't do it forever. Do it for a while. Do it for a couple of years, but you cannot do it forever. There's just no way. I just don't think any rational person can take that and say, no, it's not going to happen. Number 10, Obamacare premiums nationwide have increased, doubled, tripled, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. Healthcare is expensive. It's a sham. It's not a sham. Healthcare is real, obviously. Go to the doctor if you need help. But the way that they charge for it, the way that profit, the way that, everything is sort of beholden to the doctors, nurses, and like back to my ounce of prevention. Before I make an hour-long video here, if you want to reduce healthcare costs in this country, spend more money on prevention. Get people to see medical professionals more often. And I say this as my back hurts. I didn't pull a muscle. I don't need a brace. I need to ice it a little bit. Doctors can't really do much for kind of pulling a muscle a little bit. So, but if you want cheaper healthcare, get people in the beginning. Life is so exponential. I'm going to draw another exponential curve. And even if it's not exponential, even if it's linear, it's still okay. Linear, exponential. If you don't know what exponential means, it means the rate at which it grows increases over time. So the slope of this linear graph, always the same. So here, if I go twice as high, it's twice as much, in the x-axis. But on the exponential one, down here, it might be twice as much, isn't a big deal. But from like here to here, twice as much could be like 4 times as much or 10 times as much or whatever. Healthcare costs are like this. Someone has like a little sniffy nose or a little cut, you're down here in a little small range. They get kind of like a crappier infection, they're up here in the kind of infection range. You start talking about losing limbs and needing organ transplants, they're in the tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars range. So, back to my opinions on poverty and what is it really costing us and what are we missing out on by letting some of our populace get to this level when we should be keeping them in this level. Not keeping them, but helping them maintain their own lives in that level. If you want cheaper healthcare, you have to nip it in the bud. You cannot let people get super sick. Really, really sick people that are sick a lot make healthcare more expensive for everyone. It's not necessarily their fault, but in many, many instances in regards to personal health, your long-term health is ultimately reflected, by kind of all the shit that you've done up to that point. If you're living as an obese individual for 20 years, that's something that puts an incredible strain on your body. If you're using a lot of drugs, if you're drinking a lot, if you're always under stress, if you have emotional things that are afflicting you, excuse me. So that's my opinion on healthcare. Number 11. Oof, I feel strongly about this one, and I'm like so thirsty from talking so much. I can't keep this like little bit of water I just drank down. Number 11. We've spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas while our infrastructure at home is so badly crumbled. God, we spend a lot of money overseas. I really don't like it. We give money to countries that don't like us. We spend ludicrous amounts of money on the military. Of course, I don't know if it's of course, but I am pro-military. I am pro-strong national defense. I don't think we need thousands and thousands of troops overseas in all these different countries. Maybe a few countries, yeah, but military, as much as I love them, y'all are expensive as fuck. Oh my God, military is so expensive. Because when you're in the military, this is how the ration goes. These are our men and women. And I don't think this rationale is wrong, but this is the rationale. These are men and women who have volunteered to die for us. We're going to keep them safe no matter what the cost. And we're going to win no matter what the cost. I absolutely agree that we need to keep our men and women safe. I absolutely agree that we need to win when we fight. We shouldn't be fighting. And we should basically be avoiding fighting as much as possible. But that whole no matter what the cost mentality that somehow the military has kind of adopted or has become part of the culture for whatever reason, It's making us poor as a country. Again, it's so easy to take someone that's saying we need to spend wisely on the military and say, wow, it's unpatriotic. And what if North Korea and what if Russia and what if China and on and on and on. So my point is, yes, of course we need a military. We have a very, 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 very strong military. We have enough nuclear weapons to probably destroy every single planet in the universe. Let's say that again. I think we probably right now have enough nuclear weapons to destroy every planet in the solar system. Oh, yeah, I said universe, in the solar system, not the universe, but at least in the solar system. Now, maybe you'd have to drill and put them a few miles down or something, but as far as pure energy, pretty sure we could. So, this whole idea of like, our soldiers are going to run out of bullets. We need more bullets. We need more jets. We need more ships. We need more. Sure, in general, we do, but we have a very strong military. And the point about why save money on the military, because the military is a fairly substantial portion of our spending, especially now. We are stealing from our future by going into debt like we are for all the things that we spend money on, not just the military. The money we spend on debt, the money we spend on, um, retirement. And I'm not saying we need to like end Social Security or change the age or stuff like that, but the financial obligations of this government are onerous, hugely onerous, just completely beyond what is sustainable. And that's a really big problem. That is a very, very big problem. If you have a friend who has a lot of credit card debt, the worst that can happen